14th Public Planning Committee meeting. If there are no changes to the agenda, is there a motion to accept as submitted?
So moved. Second.
Second, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Approval of the minutes of the February 8th Public Planning Committee meeting.
Move to accept the minutes from the February 8th public planning meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. Passed unanimously. Appearance by citizens. Kimberly, do we have any citizens who would like to address the dais?
I have two. The first one is Skip Hoagland.
I don't see Mr. Hoagland
Yeah, I
here.
don't see him. And then Keith Burns.
Good morning.
Mr. Burns.
I come to you this morning as president of the Sea Pines POA, and at your meeting in February, this body undertook a discussion of the potential of adding a occupancy limit provision to the short-term rental ordinance, and decided to table that to a future meeting. But the Sea Pines POA board, upon hearing that, decided to engage our membership on this topic. So the first thing we did on February 22nd, we sent an informational email to our members. It did several things. It informed them that the committee was discussing this possible short-term rental occupancy topic. It stated clearly that the Sea Pines POA would not take a position on this issue in any way. It provided a link to the materials that the staff posted on your town website that was used in the conversation and deliberation in the February meeting, and advised that our membership would get a survey that they would be able to engage on this topic and speak for themselves. A copy of the informational email has been provided to town staff for reference. Next thing we did as a subgroup, the POA board completed a survey, a short one. We also engaged a volunteer member who was editor of a major metro newspaper for many, many years and had a lot of interest and experience in surveys. Our goal was designed to make the questions neutral and to eliminate selection bias based on just how the questions were worded. A copy of the survey cover memo email was provided to staff also for reference. On March 1st, we sent 2,980 surveys, all to discrete emails for residential property owners within Sea Pines. We left it open for 1 week so that we would have sufficient time to accumulate those responses for this meeting at the time we thought it would be on the agenda. At midnight, we closed it, and we ended up with 1,049 completed surveys for a response rate of 35.2%, which exceeded our expectations. 85% of the respondents favored one of the three occupancy limit mechanisms that were discussed at your outlined in your February meeting, which leaves 15% of the respondents favored no change to the short-term rental ordinance. We also asked a question how our member used their property, either as a permanent.
Excuse me, Mr. Burns, we normally have a limit of 3 minutes.
Oh, I thought it was 5. I'm sorry.
But I'm going to allow you to continue, but speed it up to the.
Will do. I'm almost done. Yeah.
If
I was fitting in 5.
Can we just take a moment? I think y'all's microphones are on because it's,
Yeah, I'll get a little feedback, yeah.
Hear y'all, the feedback. So I'm not sure how it's happening, but.
Anyway, sorry. So we asked the residents how they use their property, either permanent residence, part-time, no rent, part-time rent, or was rental. 30% of the respondents indicated that they rented in some capacity, which means that fully half who do rent supported some occupancy limit mechanism. The last thing we did was ask an open-ended question as to why you picked the occupancy limit mechanism you did, or why you wanted no change to the ordinance. All those comments were loaded into an Excel file And the only editing we did was to eliminate columns for personal identifiers, names and emails, and to adjust column width and line size to be able to read the comments more readily. The good thing about Excel is it's all sortable, so you can sort by the answer to the question of what limit you favor or why you didn't, or you can sort it by how they use their property, or you can dual sort it, which is very interesting, so that you can analyze it in a lot of different fashions. So all that was provided to the staff. So the Sea Pines POA respectfully submits this feedback from over 1,000 residential property owners in Sea Pines, and we are glad that you would use it in deliberation of this important topic. So
Mr. Burns, may I
Yes, sir.
make a request, either a copy of that or just hand that to Kimberly over there so that we can have it for the record?
Certainly can.
I'd be interested in that data.
I have very bad handwriting, but I will do so.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
And I would just add to that, I know staff has the information. If we can get that forwarded to us, I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Kimberly, are there any other, no more citizen comments? Unfinished business today is a consideration of a resolution supporting the town of Hilton Head Island conditions and trends assessment. Missy Lewick, Director of Planning, will make a presentation. Morning, Missy.
Morning. Nice to see you all. Okay. Well, I am really excited to talk about this conditions and trends assessment. We first introduced this document to this body in January. At that time, the presentation covered a little bit of the topic areas in more detail. Today's presentation is largely an overview of the document at a very high level and how we intend to use the information going forward. So the document covers, should give us a pretty good understanding of the health of our community in one comprehensive data assessment report. What it does is it collects and organizes a baseline of critical data, identifies some of those as major trends, clearly communicates the information with a series of infographics and data and metrics, and then considers at the end several strategies of how this information could be applied in future conversations. So the document is based on, and I brought our plan, it is based on the town's comprehensive plan, is based on a reflection of the core values within that plan as well that are listed here. There are 10 topic areas that the plan covers. That includes demographics, workforce, economics, real estate, environment, housing, governance, engagement, systems, and land use. And then this shows how those 10 topic clusters are related to the comprehensive plan and directly relate to the plan elements that are required within our comprehensive plan. So the one thing that we added to the document since we introduced it in January was a user guide. And so the next slides cover the user guide pages, and those new pages in the document were up front on pages 6 and 7 in the plan. And really it covers, as we had some questions from January, how we as a town would be utilizing this information, how you as decision makers could utilize this information, and the community at large, how they can utilize this information as well. So the user guide was created to answer some of those questions and to provide that within the document so it gives some structure to how this data can be applied going forward. But one, it provides a common starting point to add context to these community conversations with respect to both local and regional trends, and to connect that information, share the data and resources, and move forward from there. The user guide does at a high level indicate that these would be informing recommendations or future policy initiatives that would be incorporated in future comprehensive plans, future strategic action plans, our capital improvement program, future budget documents, et cetera. And so I just wanted to reiterate that all of these user components are for future conversations and strategic directions that council will approve. So those future policy decisions would still come back to council for their discussion and deliberation. The next main kind of user group is that this informs those future plans and studies. So it provides that baseline set of findings to help us focus and direct work. It'll be utilized throughout the organization on all of the work that we're doing that falls within these 10 topic clusters. And it helps us accelerate, just the understanding of the data, and then further analyze that data in that work that's going on throughout the organization. It also helps us sort those priorities as they're sorted here in the 10 topic clusters. It helps us relate those 10 topic clusters back to our strategic plan and those plan elements that guide us as an organization within the comprehensive plan. It also helps us create and identify, what are those trends, what are those ideas and concepts that we might want to create future policy or action if there's a trend that we would like to course correct. If it's trending in a direction and we'd like to stabilize that or reverse that trend. Those are just, right now, it's a set of data and information, and then there's a series of suggested strategies at the end of the document that identify, some tactics and strategies to do some of those things. And then this also allows us to measure progress. So it is, of course, a much more detailed data set than what we have in the comprehensive plan, and allows us going forward to utilize this as baseline. So this is, of course, a data analysis report. So it is a snapshot in time currently. We intend to update this document and this body of information at some regular interval going forward. But it will allow us to then have trend line data that we can look to, with this as the starting point, and we can measure from here. So who would be utilizing this document, as we mentioned up front? Everyone, really, the general public, town council, town staff, development partners, the community at large would be able to utilize this data and information. And we hope to, after adopted, utilize this in a graphic way on our website to have this displayed on our website. So also the document itself offers just enabling a culture of data-driven decision-making. It provides a lot of valuable insights, hopefully in a format that's easy to digest, even though there's quite a bit of information in the report. And then it hopefully will allow us to improve program outcomes with having this level of information and data at our fingertips, and to be able to anticipate those trends and their impacts on our community, where we can create future policy or future programs based on those trends and information. So the plan itself, again, it helps us with our strategic thinking. We are going to be going into a strategic plan workshop going forward, and this does give us a lot of information, as you can see on this wheel, to one, understand, study, and analyze the information, reveal the information, attach those to various work program, apply it to future policies or projects, and then evaluate going forward. So this is an ongoing effort and allows us to be a lot more data focused and driven. So today, before the Public Planning Committee, is a resolution before you to consider adoption of the resolution and recommendation to council. And I would take any questions from here.
Thank you, Missy. I appreciate the time and effort of staff in putting this together. Questions from the committee? Bryson?
Sure. First of all, it's an incredible amount of work and data. So thank you very much to the town staff and our consultants for putting this together. It's going to be very useful. One of the notes I saw in there that it's going to be more informational as opposed to notions we have about what the data might show. So I like those facts that are provided in here. I think it's going to be very helpful. The town council has a workshop on our strategic plan coming up a week from today at the Westin for folks who need to know where we're going to be from starting at 9 in the morning until 4 p.m. A strategic planning workshop to look at our strategies. And I think it'll help us, and I hope that all of us will look at that before the meeting next week. A couple of questions that I have is that I understand that we are to look at this plan as informational to guide us for the future. But I know that there are a couple of sections in here that talk about current actions. It's page 134 on the draft I have, but I think it's about 136. There are 5 current actions. And then towards the end of the document, there's future strategies and actions, or action. Within that, of the 10 topic areas, there are recommendations for timeframes, some that are continuous, some that are short-term, some are immediate, which is 0 to 1 year, and some are short-term, 1 to 3 years. Some are midterm, 3 to 5 years, and then some are long-term, 5 to 10 years. So my question for you is that the way that it's set out is the proposal for us to, for town council to adopt this, and that thereby also adopting the implementation schedule in here. So my question is it for us to adopt today and to sort out these strategies right now, or is it for us to consider in the future?
So the wording of the strategy section, again, is that this information is for planning, budgeting, and prioritizing, and that these would be considered through subsequent and future focused conversations. And, but these were created to provide some direction and analysis based on the data that's provided in the report, but that all of these could be incorporated into future strategic action plans, capital improvement plans, comprehensive plans, town budgets, of which would be policy directives by council. So what's before you today is that the plan itself is a data report, and these are as worded as potential strategies, future strategies and steps. And again, that paragraph underneath the strategy section does describe that the purpose of this is for planning and prioritizing, and that these would be future decisions.
Yeah, and my question is mostly about the language, future strategies and action, and then there's some language on down about potential actions. So my question is, are we adopting these as our strategies that we're planning on right now, or are we to consider this in the future?
They're for considerations in the future.
Okay. So it seems as though it would be better to set out these as potential future strategies and actions, and then the current actions, maybe potential first steps. Wouldn't that more accurately reflect what the intent would be?
If there's support to make some changes via motion for consideration, I think the document was structured in a way that I think it's saying the same thing as what you're saying, but if you're looking for clarity and there's support to make those changes, then we could look at doing those.
I think that'd be helpful, because I did look through all of those future strategies and action on the 10 categories, and I counted up for 0 to 1 year immediate, a total of 13 under different categories. For instance, there are 2 under workforce, 1 under environment, 4 under housing, 2 under governance, 1 community engagement, 1 systems, and 2 land use. So, if you look at that and go like, well, those must be the immediate priorities. And so what I'm hearing from you is that these are ones for us to consider as part of our discussion on our strat plan, should these be the ones that we do right away? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and we looked at creating the timeframes within this section to correlate to the timeframes in the strategic action plan that council adopts, so that if there was an appetite to include some of these strategies in future strategic action plans, future comprehensive plans, future town council adopted, documents and direction, that it could be easily translated from this document and applied.
For the future. And for short term, 1 to 3 years, which is pretty soon, under demographics, there are 7, workforce 4, economics 4, real estate 5, environment 4, housing 3, governance 3, community engagement 4, systems 6, and land use 5. So a total of 45 of those, that's a lot. I think that the trouble that I have is that the proposal before us is to adopt this, which means that we are adopting this as the plan for those years. So I think the data itself is great, but my question is, what do we do about the strategies that are set out in here? And I think it's better that we accept this report and that we clearly indicate in the language that this, the future strategies and action are potential. For instance, and I apologize if I don't have the right page number, I think it must be 137 with a couple of pages added for the user guide. But the title of it says Future Strategies and Action. So instead of indicating that those are strategies and action that we are adopting today or recommending adoption today, but those are potential future strategies for us to consider. So I understand that's the intent. And so I think it would be helpful that we accept this and that we include that clarifying language in there.
Thank you, Ms. Bryson. Ms. Becker?
Thank you, Missy. I know this was a tremendous amount of work. Not sure who all was involved in it. I looked carefully through the document for those notations as to where the information was coming from, how current it was, and then just looking for a reliability as to the document in itself. And I'm going to step out of what I was going to say just so I can follow up on what Ms. Bryson was saying. It is my hope that we are not approving something that, or by resolution, that would become a finalized document. To me, as I read it with the intent of it being suggestions, providing data that we could analyze to find where we needed to move forward and what the policy should be as a council. So to follow up on what Ms. Bryson said, I want to make sure also that we're not accepting by resolution something that is more written in stone than not. I would probably be more comfortable with some of the suggestions that were made and a further discussion as to the strategies, what's included underneath each of those, and the time frame itself, so that it aligns more closely with the board, the council's intent moving forward. So just to follow up on that. And the reason that's important is because as I look through it, there are things that, I have marked with asterisks that I'm not necessarily sure should be included in here, or maybe the wording should be included in here. But what it did overall, as I read the document, was it gave me confidence in a position that I've held for a long time, which is that the island is at capacity, near capacity, just over capacity. And we see that in all of the statistics that are given and data that's provided here that tells us that our major focus in terms of influx on a daily, monthly, yearly basis is due to our visitors and our tourists. And we appreciate and respect and want them to come. But we do have a capacity limitation here on the island. And as those pressures become evident, a lot of the data supports the fact that we are now trying to stretch ourselves beyond focus on residential. And I do see there is a section in here that brings it back to residents. But overall, a lot of the issues are driven by the fact that we are trying to accommodate more people who come as visitors and tourists. And so that bothers me, that this document has that general focus, and it brings to life the fact that we truly are working with strategies that are to accommodate more and more people coming here. And the problem with that, if you take it a little bit further, is that the issues that we have with short-term rentals, the issues that we have with parking, the issues that we have with employment and businesses, is that they're not necessarily increasing to support our residents as we would hope they might, but they're increasing to a level that we can't manage because of those tourists. And so we're endeavoring to look for more workforce housing to accommodate more workforce to accommodate more tourists. We're looking for more vacation rentals to accommodate more tourists. We're looking burgeoning in issues on our beaches and roads and parks to accommodate more tourists. And while that makes sense on one hand, as an island of residents, it doesn't. It says to me that we've lost our focus, that we're deteriorating the quality of life for residents in favor of ever increasing numbers of visitors. And perhaps there are many reasons for that, but one very well might be, and my cynical self will say it out loud, to increase the revenue, not just for the island, but clearly for the county and the state, because we are a cash cow. So on the backs of Hilton Head residents, we're providing that. That does not make me comfortable. That's everything that I've been concerned about since I've been a resident here, and certainly since I've been on the island, the council. So further development to accomplish those goals doesn't sit well with me. One particular issue that I found interesting was on page 44 as it's listed, but I see that there's differing numbers, so it might actually be page 29. But there's a statistics in terms of people who live and work on the island. So we talked about the 14,800 people who come onto the island every day to work. There's a number, which is an increase there, and I can't remember the percentage. I think it's 23% or something close to that. And then the intersecting piece is 6,400, I believe, that are residents who live and work on the island. And there's a decrease there of residents who live and work on the island. And then the third section is, I believe it was 8,400. I may have those two numbers backwards. But there's an increase in number of people who live on the island and are working off the island. So we're bringing in 14,800 people and we're sending off to work and sending off the island. And did I have it right or do I have it backwards? Is it 84 and 64 or 64 and 84?
The 84 are those that live and work. The 64 is live on island and employed off island.
Okay, and that's an increase, a substantial increase.
That is 56%.
So what does that tell us? I mean, so there's numbers here and we're looking at them, but what does that really tell us? What is the analytics behind that? To me, as I read it, it indicates to me that for some reason, we've got more people leaving the island to work when we clearly need workers on the island. So who are those workers? What jobs are they in? I have nothing that tells me anything more. Yes, thank you for pulling it. Anything more about that? And I think that's a really important statistic that was in the document. So as we look to approve it, et cetera, I don't want to just approve a document that has information in it that we don't understand what it means. And I understand from what you outlined to us that those are for future looks, et cetera. But I think right now that's a really important statistic for us to understand as one example. And so I don't want to belabor it. I know that there's a lot of work behind this. I know these are suggestions for the future. I know that we as a council need to dive into it. And I'm not sure we've had adequate time to be able to do that in order to move forward with accepting it by resolution. So I'm going to be quiet now. Those are all my thoughts. Worried about capacity, worried about who our focus is really for. I saw in one of the bullet points, I think it was on page 12, second bullet point was a commitment to continued growth. I'm not making that commitment. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what that means to our residents. So,
I saw the same thing. I saw the same statistic, but I think it was in the context of the report, not of the population.
it is in the context of the report, but it still doesn't tell me anything about what that means and who's directed to it.
I agree that we can do better in that particular case for clarity. Thank you, Nick.
I view this report in two essential sections, one of which is extraordinarily amount of very helpful demographic information. Really fascinating numbers in there. I think all of us that try to deal with the future of the island need to be quite aware of those statistics. And excellent job done there. The second part, in my mind, is dealing with the future and steps that we should consider being taken. I view this as essentially a planning document. There are lots of recommendations and suggestions in there. There's a fair number that I agree with, and there's a fair number that I do not agree with and probably would not proceed in the future. I don't view that I'm making any decisions today on any of that, that it's all up for what comes more specifically at a later date. So it's a planning document. I don't have any problem with whether we change the word adopt to accept. I think that's fine. But I'm happy to see a document like this. And while I may not think all the suggestions in there are going to be worthwhile when we get to deal with them, I don't see a need to make any changes at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Alfred. Missy, how often is it, this document to be updated? Do you have any idea? Is there any expectation?
I can't speak to it's going to be at this interval, but we have talked about the need to update it at a regular interval, whether that's every 1 year, every 2 years, every 5 years. I can't speak to that yet until I know what the level of effort is to update it. But certainly if it is not a huge heavy lift to make an update, it is our intent that this is baseline, and then we're going to measure these statistics going forward. So we will update it at an interval to be determined.
All right, thank you. That is the area where it says commit to continual growth, and I think that's an asterisk that you ought to delve into. You used the word adoption. That's been questioned by a couple of people here at the dais. Is there a difference in your mind between adoption, accept, approval?
Well, what will go to council is a consideration of adoption of the resolution, whether the resolution language says we're adopting or accepting this document. Because it's based on a resolution, those are reviewed by our town attorney and the language is approved. I would defer to Curtis to weigh in on that, if I may.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The text of the resolution, as it's written, is intended to do two things. Number one, when council adopts something, it states that is the policy that council now has adopted. The second text, and second number B in the text, then authorizes the manager to go execute the policy. So here, if you I mean, you can change the language in the resolution to say, council hereby accepts this. I don't know what that means or what anyone is supposed to do with it. Council has accepted it, that's fine, but is anyone supposed to actually act on it or to then begin to bring council things in the future based on this for council's consideration? I mean, that's what this does. As it's been described, this is a planning document. It has a number of things in it for future councils, this council or future councils to consider. But in order to get those things to council, someone actually has to go do the work, which in this case is the manager and the staff. So the language in the resolution that's before you is very typical. You've seen it before. And, you know, while it doesn't, you know, it's short, but I mean, that's what it does. Number one, you state your policy. Number two, you authorize your manager to go execute it. If you change it, which you can do, to we accept this, I mean, again, I don't know what the next step is following the acceptance. What's anyone supposed to do with it?
I think we can sidestep this issue if it's an agreement here. We can accept, but what goes to the town council and the town council's resolution could be approval.
Well, what y'all are doing today is deciding whether or not to recommend approval or to recommend that this advance to council with your recommendation for approval or rejection.
Perhaps there's another middle ground here, and that is.
Well, but you're right. I mean, when it comes to council members can make whatever motions they wish to address the resolution that is before council.
That's my point.
There's been discussion of two aspects here, adopt versus accept, and adding additional language that says this is for among the possibilities or suggestions. We could do adopt and have that additional language in there that you suggested, Ms. Bryson, about these are things that should be taken into consideration or that we should review.
Yeah, and for me, it's clear the difference in the language. If we adopt it, then we are adopting these as our implementation plan. Because the resolution, the second paragraph under the ordering clause, if you will, or the resolution clause, the first paragraph is either adopted or accepted. The second paragraph says the town manager is hereby authorized and empowered to take such actions as may be necessary to develop, implement, and carry into action the strategies and tactics that have been identified with the adopted conditions and trends assessment. And I'm not ready to do that.
Okay, I didn't finish what I was going to be talking about. Thank you, Curtis, appreciate it. Missy? In your opinion, is the strategic plan or the conditions and trends report at a higher level?
The conditions and trends report is a planning tool, and it's information to inform a strategic action plan.
So, in a sense, we are dealing with data and we're dealing with recommendations. I interpret the recommendations as staff who we consider our experts, daily people on the ground. They are making recommendations to us. I think the ambiguity that we have here is we aren't taking that those recommendations as simply ideas. So I think there is a word in there that we should recognize, and that would be staff's recommendations of potential strategies in the future. And so I think we're comfortable, by and large, with the data that's being prepared, but we're hung up on the issue of whether or not we're obligating the council and providing town manager the ability to implement these. So I think that's where we're hung up. if we can clarify that, and Ms. Bryson suggested the word potential, I don't have a problem adding potential to that. If there's another way that we can add or subtract that authority of the town manager, what is it that we are asking the town manager to do? If this is a planning document and we have a strategic plan that we all get involved in, what is it that the town manager is being authorized to do?
He would be authorized to enable staff to utilize this data set and information in those future policies. For example, we were just talking about a housing statistic. We would be utilizing that information to do exactly what Ms. Becker was asking, dive in deeper to find out more about those particular statistics about our employment levels, where people work, where are we trending, and map that going forward and use that as information to inform that policy initiative. We would utilize this information in some of the growth management work that we're doing in the district planning, in our resiliency plan, in our corridors plan, as there's transportation and land use information. So it's utilizing it in the work that it's authorizing the town manager to enable staff to utilize this in our work program.
Yeah, but again, I understand that, that's clear, but we have statements of implementation with timelines that may or may not be supported by council down the road. So I'm looking for a word or phrase that allows us to say, okay, these are prospective, these are potential. And maybe if the word potential does it, then I would support that.
Sure, so I heard potential strategies, or it could say recommendations for the title of this chapter. For the timeframes, I heard the word potential in front of timeframes, or word, like those could be an amendment to today to the document, if that resolves kind of the question that's in the air.
How do others feel about that? That's fine?
So to me, looking at it and hearing all of this discussion, what it seems to me, this really should be considered as information that is handy for y'all to have as issues come up for you to refer to be able to bring back something concrete-ish with regard to data that is somewhat current and reliable now. Whether it'll be in 3 or 5 years is highly unlikely. So that updating is very important. What I'm uncomfortable with is doing anything that adopts this and puts it on a shelf so for someone else, whether it's our town manager or someone, to pick it up and say, these are the things we're supposed to be doing and moving forward with implementing them. So at this time, I don't think we've had enough opportunity to really take it all in, digest it, bring back our notes to be able to say, you know, all of the issues that we may or may not have within the strategies, within the data. I think we need more time to do that. I don't really feel confident and won't vote for it today, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bryson, are you comfortable with the inclusion of the word potential in front of strategies?
Yeah, I think there are 3 places, 2 of which we've talked about. So page 113 that you have up on the screen, potential strategies. The next page, I won't scroll to a different page. Current steps, so potential first steps, potential first steps, and then the next page, potential future strategies and steps. So it's potential everywhere, and then I have some suggested language to change in the resolution, but I think it might be helpful to see if there's public comment first.
Well, let's get to it. So if we're comfortable, consensus on potential being included. Okay.
Is there a rush to get this done today? Is there any reason that we don't have more time to review it, comment on it, and have a document that is a little bit?
I'm ready to move it forward if two other people on.
I
Okay.
understand, but is there a timeframe that we're missing out on if we don't do that?
Well, we've been working on it for a long time, and it was introduced in January. We hadn't heard a lot of these concerns from the introduction till today. This document is one that we would like to use to inform the other planning work that is going on behind it. And so we would, from a staff perspective, like to move it forward today, if at all possible.
I find this very informative and helpful in terms of our discussions next week. I interpret the implementation strategies as recommendations by staff. That informs me as to where staff thinks things ought to be. We can disagree, but I think that if we're comfortable utilizing strategies, how do people feel about the word adopt at this point? Steve, Mr. Alfred? Adopt, accept, do you feel strongly about?
Once we get potential in there, I have no problem with adopt, but in light of Mr. Coltrane's comments, I think we should not use accept.
Okay. I'm comfortable with adopt.
I'm not, there's clear distinction between accept. You accept things for the record all the time. You accept things as information. That's what we're doing. There's a clear distinction in my mind, and I will not support adopt.
Okay. And I think I understand where you are.
I want to adopt
Okay.
it.
Okay. My suggestion then would be that we use the word accept and allow town council and as a full body to determine whether it's adopting or accepting. Okay, all right. The issue of the town manager that you brought up. If we are dealing with potential strategies, I don't have a problem with authorizing the town manager to move forward. He can't do anything without our blessing anyway.
Although it says clearly, the town manager is hereby authorized and empowered, so we are giving him that authority, to take such actions as may be necessary to develop, implement, and carry into action the strategies and tactics that have been identified within the adopted, accepted conditions and trends assessment.
But he can't do anything without our approval on terms of CIP or budget. Curtis?
To your point, Ms. Becker, what it empowers him to do is to utilize this, to bring things back to council in the areas Missy mentioned, budgeting, planning, what have you. Everything comes back to council anyway. It doesn't, so what this does is authorizes him to utilize this data and this document to do those things. Doesn't, but he's got to be instructed to do that before he can do that.
And I respectfully disagree with that analysis. I agree with Ms. Becker. The language is clear. It doesn't say to utilize this. It says to implement and carry into action the strategies and tactics.
I think you could fix that by using that more as illustrative or some of those as he desires to pursue. I don't think we can require him to pursue every single suggestion that's on there. I don't think he would find the time to do that. Practical matter, he's going to take the ones that look most promising. And I think that the language should reflect that. This is.
There's a sort of philosophical difference here. I look at the town manager as the person I rely on to bring forward ideas that he is experiencing or seeing that need to be addressed. I don't think I have the answer because I'm not on the ground every single day to be able to do that. I rely on the town manager to do that. So I'm comfortable giving him the authority to bring forward to me those things that he thinks needs to be done.
That's what it should say then.
Yeah, I know, but that's not the language that we are.
I know, but we should, then if we're changing language to make sure it reflects our intent, then it should change it.
But I don't have the language to be
Then
able to do that.
today's not the right day to accept or
Okay,
adopt.
okay. Again, if it's the pleasure of this body to exclude that paragraph, we can accept this report today, but I would anticipate that the full town council will deal with the word adoption and the authority of the town manager.
Mr. Chair, I have suggested alternate language instead of that paragraph 2 that we're discussing. Language to state the following: the town manager is authorized to use the conditions and trends assessment for future planning purposes, period.
Missy, does that create an issue for staff?
In my mind, it doesn't. Does it for you, Curtis? Okay.
Okay. Then we're at a point where we are going to use the word potential, as Ms. Bryson suggested. We're going to use the word accept as the consensus, or at least the undecided of the group, and we will use Ms. Bryson's language of that paragraph.
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
Please.
I'll try to go more slowly. The town manager is authorized to use the conditions and trends assessment for future planning purposes.
Okay.
And I think one thing that's always helpful as we're making these changes to motions is that if we could have the document in front of us to read it. Certainly we've sat here and we've heard, and Patsy eloquently expressed it very clearly. But for me, having that language in front of us as we are accepting, in this case, a document, so I know for certain what has been translated is important.
That last paragraph.
No, I know which paragraph.
I think it's this word. And I don't know if I can edit on this right now.
Okay. Before we have the final motion, would anybody would like to add a public comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Christopher Cliff. This is a great document. I wouldn't like anything I'm about to say to be interpreted as criticism of the work that's been done. However, I do think in key economic areas in this report, it suffers from what Greenspan called irrational exuberance. For example, if you look at the real estate section, it underestimates the economic boost we all received from COVID. Huge boost. And we're now going through a correction. But during that huge expansion of real estate volume, significant changes occurred. So if you look at this section, also it talks about the percentage of property locally owned. I suggest that needs to be looked at more closely. For example, there's been a significant increase in cash purchases. A lot of the purchases are through vehicles which are registered in South Carolina, but the beneficial owner is outside South Carolina. So is that a local investment, local ownership, or is it external? The report refers to average retail prices, real estate prices. That's misleading. It's a hopeless statistic. You should look at median, because during the COVID period of 3 years, from the third quarter 20 through to the first half 22, there was a huge sales of ocean and beachfront properties which have distorted the average prices and pulled everything up. A closer look needs to be taken at the construction permits that were issued. Many of those permits were issued related to investors wanting to renovate, remodel short-term properties to increase occupancy, of which there's no measures at all. The report talks about the growth in tourism. I think it's fanciful. I do a statistic that goes back to 2018, and I monitor traffic coming on the island and airline passengers coming on the island. If there's been a 400,000 increase in tourism, I don't know how the hell they get on the island, because they don't come in vehicles, they don't come in airplanes. And the airport is talked about making a significant local economic impact. That's not true at all. If you look at the statistics for the airport and what's happened on arrivals since 2021, there's been a collapse. There's no growth whatsoever. And the airport, thank goodness, is owned by Beaufort County, so they can take the risk. If you look at also the impact upon resident as against non-resident, there's been a significant shift. Take sea pines, for example. When we bought in sea pines at the end of 2000, it was 70% more than 70% were owned occupied. That's now collapsed to about 20%. The growth in non-resident ownership on this island is absolutely staggering, and none of that is brought out in this report. So I think the report suffers from exuberance in its interpretation of real estate, non-resident versus resident, and tourism. Bearing in mind that in the period there's been a huge expansion in rooms, hotels, and so on. And so it's just not there. And as Missy says, this is a baseline. It's got to be more accurate before you approve it. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments at this time? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, afternoon, morning, I think. Heather Rath, for the record, I'm speaking as a resident today. I don't know, his feedback was absolutely awful, so I hope that you all can hear me. Okay. Thank you so much for presenting this report. Great data, great information. I agree with every single one of the comments that were made today, including the comments that we just heard. So I've reframed some of my comments on here. So let me just go ahead and dig in. I only have a couple of minutes. Okay. Just some technical errors that were throughout the document that I just want to make note of. One of those is on page 9. It talks about town residents per staff as compared to page 65. Those numbers are not reflective of one another. So that's in just two different places. I've seen that a couple of times throughout the document. So I just want to make sure that there's a good, clean scrub of where the numbers are. There's a section, I think on page 31, that talks about business permits and the number's skyrocketing, which, yes, if you look on paper, it has, but that also doesn't really take into consideration, as much as I would like it to, how those business licenses are the short-term rental permits. So the way that it actually looks like our business licenses are down a little bit. So I just want clarity on that because I want to make sure that I'm accurate on that. The continued growth, that was a trigger for me too, as it was for Ms. Becker and Mr. Ames. I really would like to see town council determine an updating date in this document in your acceptance. So we're going to update this every year, every 3 years, every 2 years, something along those lines. I think that that's really important. And then last, I really think that it's important because it's stated a number of times throughout the document, limited services government. This is a conversation that we've had on this island since 1983. And I think that it's really important that we get this definition and we define this and we get it down. There's no definition for limited services government that I could find in our town code. There also is nothing with the National Association of Cities or Municipal Association of South Carolina. So if there is a definition of it, I think that it needs to be embedded in this and then voted on by council. And I would just like some clarity on that. So again, I know that the microphone is a little bit screwed up. I hope that y'all can hear me. If not, I can type up the comments and email them to you.
We can hear you. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Owen Amber, 5704 Drive, Hilton Head Plantation. This is really a working document rather than a policy document. There are at least two different parts to it that can and perhaps should be treated separately. The data and trends and the recommendations, the steps and strategies. And the steps and strategies aren't real until somebody's been assigned the lead role for performing them, and start and end dates have been assigned to that objective and performance metrics. So, the document should be updated as frequently as there's a change that's significant enough to warrant updating it. The process should not be allowed to impede the updating and maintenance of the document. And that means, of course, it should be electronic rather than paper and PDF based. and it should be easier for citizens and others to engage in providing input and feedback on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais. Bryson, do you have a motion?
I do, and I apologize to the town clerk. I've got it scribbled down, so I'll give you my scribble afterwards, and I'll try to go slow.
Chair, if I may just take a moment, because we heard some great feedback that I think has informed us of other people who we represent and serve, their impressions of the document, and some helpful suggestions to improve it, and to ensure that we have accepted something that is, reflects the community's concerns, my concerns, others, prior to moving forward on it. Again, I think that if we don't do that, we're not listening. We haven't read carefully, and we're not, as much as I appreciate the fact of how long it's been worked on, et cetera, doesn't reflect our responsibility to put something on a shelf that is accurate and responsible.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Bryson, do you have a motion?
I'm writing the last word now. So I move to recommend that the town council accept the conditions and trends assessment with the following amendments. On page 113, write the word strategies and insert in lieu thereof potential strategies. On page 114, strike the phrase current steps and insert in lieu thereof the phrase potential first steps. On page 115, strike the phrase future strategies and steps and insert in lieu thereof the phrase potential future strategies and steps. And further, to amend the draft resolution as follows: in the seventh whereas, to strike the word adoption and insert in lieu thereof the word acceptance. And under the resolution clause, in paragraph number 1, strike the word adopted and insert in lieu thereof the word accepted. And in the second clause under the resolution language, strike number 2 and insert in lieu thereof the following sentence: the town manager is authorized to use the conditions and trends assessment for future planning purposes. Finally, to ask the town manager to have the town staff review the document in light of the public comments to make any technical corrections.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you very much.
Before you call the vote, Chair, just one more point. Were each of you able to follow each of those changes? Are you confident that the document now reflects and will reflect those changes without having seen it and being able to read it so that you know what you're approving?
Thank you. I call the question. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed? Passes 3-1. Thank you very much. That will be all today. Meeting adjourned.